North Gauteng High Court has heard an application challenging the diplomatic immunity of Zimbabwe's former First Lady Grace Mugabe. It follows a decision by DIRCO Minister Maitengwane Mashabane that allowed Mugabe to avoid an assault charge in South Africa. Sindisiwe Twala files this report.
Spousal immunity is under scrutiny in the North Gauteng High Court. The Democratic Alliance and lobby group AfroForum lodged the case on behalf of Gabriela Engels. This follows an alleged assault on Engels by former Zimbabwean First Lady Grace Mugabe in August 2017.
Whether the authorities had acted lawfully, and we would say whether the Minister of DIRCO, International Relations, had acted lawfully, importantly, was and remains a live issue. And we would say the same to your Lordship today. Did the Minister of International Affairs and Relations act lawfully? It remains a live issue. And in any event, the question arises on the Odekral principle that her decision stands until it is set aside.
The state points out that the court must simply apply the law in the case.
We're dealing with an actual fact, whether in law, customary international law, she had immunity. And if she had it, and the minister recognized it for 4 reasons, but one was the right reason, because she actually had it. The minister couldn't take it away by not recognizing it. That's the point.
3 civil organizations were admitted as friends of the court. They argue that the immunity in question tramples on constitutional rights.
If, therefore, a rule of international law is justified through the limitation clause, such a rule is not inconsistent with the Constitution. This is because an infringement of a right in the Bill of Rights is not ipso facto inconsistent with the Constitution. And that, we submit, is a critical issue in terms of the analysis that this court is called upon to engage on.
Meanwhile, the complainant waits with bated breath for the court to reach a verdict.
I want the immunity to be revoked now, reversed, so that I can go forward with my case, my criminal charge case, and then hopefully get some justice and see her in court. Physically, I'm fine now, but emotionally, I'm still learning to get back into my normal routine, because people still confront me and ask me about it. But I'm slowly getting there.
For Afro World View, Sindisiwe Twala, Pretoria.
We expand the story further with my legal expert in studio, Nora Onkonko, as well as the Thapelo Tselapaedi, who's a political analyst, joining us on the line. We also have in studio here, who joins me next, is the Diaspora's Prince Abenge, African Diaspora Forum Secretary General, as well as DA's James Self on the line. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your time. Let me start with you, Mr. Abenge. You are saying that respecting the role of the host countries, you're saying that it's something that is rather imperative in this case.
Yes, as the Forum of Non-Nationals living in South Africa, communities living in South Africa, we see the act of the former First Lady of Zimbabwe as disrespectful and a violation of human rights, because you cannot just pop into a country and start assaulting people while they respected you, they gave you the visa. So it's a violation of human rights anyway.
Let's expand this further with you, Mr. Okonkwo. We heard Advocate Gerry Nel today in court saying that it shouldn't be, the diplomatic immunity shouldn't be a veil that's used because it was an afterthought. What is your view on that?
The point, thank you. The point is, once you're a First Lady of any country, you are bound to have diplomatic immunity. Whether you are visiting on an official business or not. That is what is associated with such caliber of people. Now, if you look at al-Bashir's case, not quite long ago, he was served to be arrested on the soil here. What happened? she was still granted the immunity. So what I'm basically saying is the law is being applied by individuals. This instance of the DIRCO was granted by the then minister. Okay, so if they found it fit that she should not be tried because of that, then so be it. We can't go against a nation's laws. I'm not saying that what she did was right. I'm not covering that up. But if you look at so many instances, it's just like saying, why are presidents not sacked in the countries when they enter? If I'm a president, I go into a country, I don't get sacked. My things go with me. Why can't we revoke those rights? But the point is that at that point, you are not supposed to use it as an abuse. That's where AfriForum is coming from. But if I were to look at it, AfriForum tends to tacitly say they champion minority rights. I wonder why, in the case of the lady that was stuffed in a coffin by the two Afrikaners, they never were vocal about it. So I begin to question what would be the objective of pursuing this matter.
And let's hold it there. Let's take this on our Skype with our guest, political analyst Thapelo Tselapedi. Good evening to you, sir. Thank you for joining us. The championing of minority rights that are raised here by Mr. Okonkwo, what is your view there? Do you feel, is there a sort of sentiment that's out there on AfriForum's direction, or perhaps the kind of agenda that is on the plate here?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Look, I think AfriForum is quite clear about the sort of group of people that it's advancing and the interest it's advancing as well. I think just like many other NGOs, particularly public interest organizations as AfriForum is, you want to be able to influence the law through strategic litigation as I understand it. And I think this example is just one instance of that as well.
No, I have another one I'll bring up.
Obviously, it's going to be an interesting case. Yeah? I think it's going to obviously be an interesting case as to how far they're going to go, and whether, you know, the issues of international relations and the issues that they're raising around constitutionality are going to be interesting. And for me, I think what's going to be important is the presiding judge, is he a person that also understands sort of the dynamics concerning issues around, you know, international relations, concerning issues around diplomatic immunities and so forth and so on. Because I think this is obviously a judgment that will have some sort of implications for a number of situations on the continent and sort of the embassies for South Africa.
Is in your view, diplomatic immunity being used as a veil here?
Look, I think it depends on how this was carried out. Or was this an instance of an afterthought, as was alluded to earlier, that she was given immunity afterwards? Did she come here for a state event, or is it a non-state event? I'm not quite sure, and I'm obviously not an expert on diplomatic immunities and such forth. But obviously, if the South African government has given her afterwards, I think it would definitely raise an eyebrow legally. But obviously, this case will help us, and as other cases have helped us, to understand more issues around these issues of diplomatic immunity.
Thank you so much for your time. I understand time is not on your side, but thank you for your input. Let me bring the discussion back to you, gentlemen, in studio. We know that, I'm looking at you, Mr. Ngonko, for this one, that AfriForum believes that setting aside the immunity is the first step towards prosecution.
Yes, that's an interlocutory application. If successful, it means then that the MPA can serve papers to Grace Mugabe in terms of the assault charge, so she can be tried. However, I don't see that happening, basically. I really don't. Whatever heads of argument they would bring upon, because remember, when you give a ruling in this regard, it sets a lot of precedent across. So I hardly see in the past a lot of matters where presidents, spouses globally have done things. I haven't seen them actually been brought to trial. Like I made mention earlier on with regards to AfriForum's intentions, okay, being objective. You would also remember that the white farmers killing, they were still not vocal on it. If we look at the matters that AfriForum are vocal on, it tends to be mostly the ones that bear selective interest. That's where I'm looking at it.
Let me take the discussion further to the DA that initially launched this application. I've got on the line James Self. Good evening to you. Thank you for your time and for joining us on the show. Of course, you are saying that it's a binding in law until it's set aside by the court.
Yeah.
Let me just get your input on this, James.
Yes. Well, thank you, and I'm afraid time is also not on my side. But essentially, we are approaching this from a rule of law perspective and a constitutional perspective. We believe that there needs to be clarity on this issue because it's essential that if the granting of diplomatic immunity was lawful, then we know it's lawful, but we suspect it was unlawful. And if it's unlawful, then it needs to be struck down as being unconstitutional and unlawful so that it will guide future applications for diplomatic immunity. Now, the state relies entirely on customary international law. There is a statute on our statute books that regulates the granting of diplomatic immunity. It does not cover spousal immunity. And in our view, what needs to happen is the court needs to rule on whether or not spousal immunity is part of our law or not. Because at the moment, in our contention, it is not. And that additionally, this granting of immunity to Grace Mugabe on that occasion was an ex post facto justification for allowing her to return back to Zimbabwe without having to face criminal charges.
Mr. Nkoko, I see you chuckling to yourself there. I don't know if you want to engage Mr. Self on this matter.
No, the matter is before the law court. We will soon hear the output and then take it further. Remember, we have different stratas of court. We have the magistrate, we have the high court, we have the SCA, we have the CC. So if it doesn't end here, it will move up to the under court to look at. So let's look at the framework of the dimensions of where the court is going to take a decision, and then from there we can comment further on.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Self. You did say that you're pressed for time, but thank you for your time. Let's move on to Willie Spies, who's on one of the attorneys on this case. Mr. Spies, I understand you've been listening in. What is your input at this point?
Well, first of all, I'm representing Gabriella Engels as well as AfriForum. The gist of the matter has been pointed out by Mr. Self, and that's exactly what the case is all about. The question is whether a head of state whose spouse commits a crime in a country, whether that spouse enjoys diplomatic immunity or not. And arguments for this whole day in court was actually centering around this question. There are different examples in different countries. Some countries do have laws that says that the spouses of heads of state do have diplomatic immunity, but our law does not state that. And international law does not state that either. The argument is very simple, that if you do not have an act of parliament that says that, or if the international law is not clear on that, then we have to be led by what the Constitution says. And the Constitution is very clear that violence and crime needs to be prosecuted, that unlawful conduct needs to be stopped, and that governments should take an active role in promoting justice and prosecuting crimes, and to ensure that the rule of law prevails, and to ensure that the equality before the law prevails. all these principles were neglected when the former Minister of International Relations and Cooperation decided to grant diplomatic immunity to Grace Mugabe. Those principles were treaded upon, and in the process, a person who was the victim of a very heinous crime of a brutal attack was left without any remedy and without the option to approach a court to see justice being done. And that's exactly what AfriForum has been trying to rectify here, and that's why we are involved in this matter. I want to correct Mr. Nkonku on his viewpoint that AfriForum is not vocal on all issues. We are very vocal on every single issue where human rights are being abused. We are very vocal about every single incident of crime, hate crimes, crimes against vulnerable people. You can mention it, and you can look at all the public statements that were issued by AfriForum in the past. Also, our Institute for Private Prosecutions is very, very active in prosecuting any matter where a crime has been committed by a person and where the National Prosecuting Authority neglects its duty to act. With regard to the so-called coffin case, we are on record that we condemned the incident. What happened was totally unacceptable. But what happened there is there was a prosecution, and the two young men that were charged were actually found guilty, and they've been in prison, and they've been sent to prison for a very long time. So the National Prosecuting Authority did its job. It did prosecute the matter, and the matter was dealt with by the court. Where AfriForum do get involved is on matters where people in power, people in powerful positions, are being allowed to do whatever they think is fine, and to get away with that solely on the basis that they are in power and that they are above the law. Those are the kind of atrocities that we do take on, and that's exactly why we decided to assist Gabriella Engels in pursuing this matter and ensuring that Grace Mugabe is brought to book.
And the court in this matter seems to be caught between a rock and a hard place over immunity. The word immunity here seems to have been dissected in all sorts of manners.
I don't really think so. I think the arguments before court were very, very clear and simple. And the two main points of departure, on the one hand, it is the argument that's been put forward by Mr. Ukenke as well, that all spouses of heads of state enjoy diplomatic immunity all over the world. That's the point of view of the government. That was the point of view of the minister. We think she was wrong. She misread the international law on that, and she misread our own laws on that matter, and she also misread the Constitution on that. The other point of view, and that's the point of view that's been presented not only by AfriForum, but also by the DA and NGOs such as the Commission for Gender Equality and Freedom Under Law and so on, was that we do have a constitution. Our point of departure is the Constitution. If the Constitution lays down certain principles and puts certain positive obligations on government to do certain things and to not do certain things, then those principles need to be adhered to. Whenever a minister makes a decision on the granting of immunity or the decision to prosecute or not to prosecute, whatever decision needs to be taken. In these circumstances, the minister decided very usefully to take the view that spouses do enjoy diplomatic immunity, regardless of the fact that there are no such rule in our law.
Okay, let me put that train of thought on hold while Mr. Spies, let me put that on hold while I come back to my guests in studio who seem to be moving about in many positions here. So tell me what you're thinking at this point in time.
Let's put aside diplomatic technicalities or the judiciary. Let's come back to human values. Grace Mugabe is a mother. She's a woman. She was supposed to be a role model in the society. But what she did, she really declined to be the model the role model for many young African women. So you cannot be a mother, a first lady, now she's a former first lady, and act in that way in a foreign country. So it doesn't, it gives some goosebump,
Yeah, it doesn't bode well for you in this matter. No. And any comments from you, Mr. Nkong?
No, it's not like what they are saying is they want to set aside the immunity and then she will come for trial. If you heard her statement, she said she was not the aggressor. So it's until this is tried and evidence brought before the court, then we can find out who is really at fault. We are all jumping the gun because they said that she was not prosecutable then. That's why she left, and we are talking about diplomatic immunity. Okay. Now, let's remove diplomatic immunity and the court takes its place. You might find out that at the conclusion, she will not be found guilty. Engels is saying in front of her children, Grace Mugabe's children, that she assaulted her and hit her with cuts while the bodyguards were watching.
Yes.
Grace is saying the statement she submitted was that she was the one aggressive towards her. So when there is a trial, you come to a conclusion. But from every point of view, the argument posited is that she is already guilty of assault.
Unfortunately, at this point in time, the images that were circulating on social media, the bruises, the scars that we saw,
which is true, which is true. Remember, you can be deemed to be assaulting on self-defense. There are so many ways to it. Yes. I'm not absolving anybody from anything.
Yeah.
I'm only saying what should be good for the geese should be good for the gander. Now, they are saying that South African law does not permit spousal immunity. Are they saying that it is okay for the presidents to have immunity and misbehave because they have the immunity? I haven't heard of any president visiting here or look that has actually abused the immunity. They come here and do their business and go, with the exception of al-Bashir that came here.
Yes.
That's all.
Let's take it back to you, Mr. Spies. Just any closing words before we wrap out. We are running out of time. So just to get a final input from you, and we know that the matter continues and the deliberations in court from tomorrow.
Exactly. I think we should not preempt what will happen in court tomorrow, but we are looking forward to the outcome, and I think it's an important court case to ensure that our law develops, that there are certainty, and most of all, it is critically important that the principle of equality before the law and the principle of accountability for whatever you do is laid down and entrenched as envisaged by the Constitution. So we are glad that this happened in the sense that it gave our courts the opportunity to develop the law and to make sure that there will be certainty in future how powerful people should or should not act in South Africa.
Thank you so much for your time. Gentlemen, last words from you before we wrap up.
I think she needs, the former First Lady needs maybe some counseling on anger management. That's very important for someone of her caliber in the society. And she has, as I said before, she has somehow disappointed many young women, many African young women in her behavior. She was maybe more to talk to her son than the girlfriend to her son. I think that was the normal parent behavior when you don't interact with somebody's child or assault somebody's child. Okay. So it's that's how we see things.
Yeah. Well, of course, we'll need to have it all heard out and spelled out in a court of law before all sorts of conclusions are made. Thank you so much to you too, Mr. Nkongko, for your input in this matter. Any closing words from you?
Well, I still believe that South African judicial system is not biased. And South Africa's judicial system under the leadership of the current Chief Justice, has actually given judgments that you see are in line with the rule of the law and the application of the Constitution. If you look at a lot of the cases that the judgment has been, you find out that it's not a walkover. Therefore, if the government has come with made a decision on the spur of the moment, because remember, every position has authority levels where they can make a decision and where they decide not to. So at this point in time, I think, like he said, let's watch out and see, but let's not just be quick to judge because of this or because of that. Yeah. If there's a trial and it's conclusive, then we can say, okay, yes, it's like this. And don't forget that the place that has, because this has constitutional element, therefore, the place that has the final say is at the CC. Constitutional Court.
And that's where we leave it. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time. And I'll be back with more news after the break.